Welcome to Conversations, a new series of webinars that SUSRIS and the Saudi U.S. Trade Group is inaugurating today. What we hope to do is to bring you speakers on topics that are of interest to those who follow U.S.-Saudi relations, and we'll have this on a regularly scheduled basis. Those who get our emails from SUSRIS and SUSTIG will see what we're up to. We'll have general announcements. We'll also, in addition to the regularly scheduled speakers, have speakers on an ad hoc basis as they become available, or if special circumstances warrant. As many of you may know, the Saudi-U.S. Trade Group is a companion project of the SUSRIS.com program, which we've been pleased to bring you for about 11 years now on Saudi-U.S. relations. A website and email service that provides articles, interviews, and special reports. But today we're pleased to talk with Richard Wilson, the president of the Saudi-U.S. Trade Group. He's based in the Washington, D.C. area, and he and I will be talking about what the Saudi-U.S. Trade Group does and introduce to you what we hope to do with these conversations on webinar. Just one final note on the webinars. This inaugural webinar is just a two-person session between Richard and I, but all of the follow-ons will be completely interactive. They'll be scheduled live so that you can tune in and participate in the conversation, ask questions of the interview subjects, and participate in our surveys. But today, Richard and I will be talking about the Saudi-U.S. Trade Group and explaining what we intend to do with the Saudi-U.S. Trade Group News Review and the publications that he is bringing to you and what we're doing at SUSRIS.com. But first, let me introduce Richard Wilson, president of the Saudi-U.S. Trade Group. Thanks for joining us, Richard.
Hey, Pat. Great to be here. Hope things are well. And congratulations on that 11 years. Wasn't it about March? Wasn't it about this time?
Right. Yeah, we're celebrating our anniversary, although we had a few months with the Saudi American Forum as the forerunner for SUSRIS. So we count March as our kickoff, but it's 11 years and change, but thank you very much.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. Glad to have you with us, and why don't you kick us off with a little overview of the Saudi-U.S. Trade Group, what the organization is, and how it came about.
Sure, and thanks, Pat. I think this is great. I'm really looking forward to the series, and I think it'll be a real contribution to the discussion. We're not as old as as I won't say Pat, but as SUSRIS. But as Pat, as you know, I'm very familiar with SUSRIS, and that was actually as part of a couple previous lives. I am the Saudi-U.S. Trade Group works very closely with the Council of Saudi Chambers of Commerce, and specifically the Committee for International Trade within the Council of Saudi Chambers of Commerce. CIT has been very supportive of SUSTIG and SUSRIS and these sorts of initiatives in the U.S. I was previously with the Middle East Policy Council, and in 2005 went to work with the Council of Saudi Chambers of Commerce. And soon thereafter, not as soon as not immediately, but not long, we established the Saudi-U.S. Trade Group, which is a 501c6 not-for-profit, which means it's a business association. The purpose was to more properly anchor the initiatives that we had in place in the U.S. and also to provide a platform to start new programs. In particular, we wanted to expand on the internet footprint that SUSRIS had pioneered and established back in '93 through various services. I mean, as you mentioned, the radio link, but there's been many other things that you've spearheaded, Pat, and with SUSRIS being the flagship in that regard. Also, we wanted to be able to partner with U.S. organizations in programming, events, and the like. And we've been very successful. We've built our readership and our internet presence I think very effectively, and actually last year was sort of a watershed year in terms of some of the metrics that we were after. It was also the third in the series of U.S. Saudi Business Opportunities Forums, which SUSRIS has been a co-organizer with. It was 2013 version of this event was held in LA. Previous ones were in Atlanta and Chicago. And it's been an extremely successful franchise, and has featured participation of well over 1,100 folks in each one, businessmen and women, senior U.S. and Saudi government officials, and actually a just unparalleled group of Saudi CEOs and leaders, business leaders, at each of those events. And in each year that we've held this U.S. Saudi Business Opportunities Forum, it's been by far the largest Saudi business event in the U.S., and we've been very pleased with those. But again, we're very happy with our partnership with SUSRIS, between these two sister organizations and websites in particular. We feel our footprint is growing and has a significant impact on driving issues and edifying people, informing people, and trying to provide some responsible and enlightening commentary on things that are important both to Saudi Arabia but also the U.S.-Saudi relationship.
Well, you trumped my thunder here. I was going to get more deeply into the Business Opportunities Forum, but many people are familiar with the Saudi-U.S. Trade Group through the fantastic news review that's been published and the great work that's being done through your website. Can you talk a little bit about some of the other things that the trade group does? I know you're involved in outreach. You mentioned working with Saudi students. There's the ambassador program, and maybe get a little bit more into what's been accomplished through the Business Opportunities Forum, specifically the connections being made. Maybe we'll dissect a little bit what happens at one of these Business Opportunity forums that our viewers today may not know if they were not participants in those. And I should mention that all of the conversations, the plenary sessions, and the breakout panels are available through SUSRIS.com, and videos are on Vimeo. So we'll have the web addresses to access all that. But it's a tremendous collection of materials. The speakers were unparalleled. The level of expertise in the breakout sessions, you just couldn't find a better collection of speakers speaking with authority on the topics they were covering in any other forum that I've seen.
I couldn't agree with you more. And allow me, if you will, Pat, to derail you again and hold on the U.S. Saudi Business Opportunities Forum to talk a little bit about the news review that you mentioned. A large part of the motivation in terms of SUSIG and its establishment as a website, we had done an internal news review for a select group. It was sort of a listserv in a way, and we really wanted to expand on this, and it's received a great audience and is grown considerably. The reason we wanted to do this, and the reason it's highly valued by its readers, and the readers across the board, both in the U.S., Saudi, and elsewhere, both in the U.S. and Saudi Arabia are primary viewers, was that we understand the nature of content and information in today's, today's everyday existence of anybody who's consuming news. And there's an extraordinary amount. It's very hard to filter out what's good, what's bad, what's useful, what's not. We serve as, we curate news, which is, the term that's used. So what we're trying to do with our news review daily is two things. One is to aggregate and filter and make judgments on what is both pertinent and as well as of a quality that merits attention. So if you get the daily review, SUSIG review, or if you visit the website, the homepage, you're going to see a well thought out I think, well-crafted collection of commentary and analysis on Saudi Arabia, on the U.S.-Saudi relationship, on regional issues, and regional issues extend across the board, not only geographic, but also to things like defense and intelligence security, and of course trade, economy, and commerce. We also have original material, and that will be that's going to continue to grow. But so what you have a unique combination of a daily resource that enables you to filter through the fire hose of information that comes out, as well as original material. And of course, most everything that's featured in SUSRIS also finds a place in the review as well. So it's, and Pat, you're aware of this. It's you sort of have all these people who subscribe to you, to the service, SUSRIS in your case, SUSTIG in ours, and then you actually run across them, and they tell you how valuable the service is and how heavily they rely on it. And these are key people in decision-making positions, they're opinion leaders, and it's good psychic income. But the point is it's a service. It's an unparalleled service. You don't find it anywhere else, and we think we're providing a comprehensive and a thoughtful window into issues and priorities. Now, related to that.
Well, let me comment on that. I do share that perspective of going to conferences and meeting people who were subscribing to SUSRIS for many years. And recently I was in Riyadh at a business luncheon, and the speaker at the podium introduced me as that SUSRIS guy, and everyone afterwards came up and we're talking about the value of that service to them and how long they had been using it, and things that they had attributed knowing about only through the service. So yeah, I've run into that phenomenon of being recognized as the SUSRIS guy, and when you publish newsletters and hit the send button, you don't realize the impact that it may have and how many people it actually goes to who see it as a valuable source of information.
Right. And the secret purpose, the secret motivation of a lot of what SUSTIG does, and particularly in the review, is all sorts of paradigms and perspectives drive reporting about Saudi Arabia or things related to Saudi Arabia. What we'd like to do is have the conversation skew a little bit more about what is of priority to Saudi Arabia and to Saudis, both in terms of its its strategic and its national interests. But there are plenty of issues, on the docket with Saudi Arabia, and there's plenty of problems they need to address. There are plenty of things that Saudis have grievances about with regard to their government, their society, just across the board. The discussion we'd like to have, and I think it's useful for anybody who's interested in the U.S.-Saudi relations, anybody interested in U.S. approach to the region, is to understand what those are, and they're not necessarily what we think they are. It's not that they don't align. It's just that it's important to understand that our priorities, our perspectives aren't necessarily salient to what's going on at decision-making levels in Saudi Arabia.
Well, you've certainly brought a lot of information to the viewers, the readers of SUSTIG, and we hope to do the same with what we produce at SUSRIS. Let's talk a little bit more about the Business Opportunities Forum, because that seems to be of great interest to people. As you mentioned, there were over 1,000 people at every one of these. It started in Chicago in 2010, and then moved to Atlanta a year later, and then this last year it was in Los Angeles. And having gone to all three and having been to other trade missions and conferences, it just struck me as being a fantastic opportunity, both in terms of the quality of the production of the conference. Everyone was very comfortable. The circumstances and accommodations were certainly terrific. But I think in terms of the quality of the speakers and And there's a lot of value at conferences of not only the who's on the podium, but also the quality of interaction in the aisles and in the back of the conference halls, when you can get up close and personal with people that you wouldn't have an opportunity to meet and talk with otherwise. So I think overall, personally speaking, I've never seen a collection of officials and business people and scholars and others from both the American side and the Saudi side who came together for several days and were available to do business deals, to talk about opportunities, to examine what's going on behind the tremendous expansion of the economy, and what prospects lie ahead. And I think our viewers today would be interested in your perspective on what makes all that happen and what the benefits are, and maybe a sneak preview into the future if there's something coming down. I know you probably ask that all the time. When's the next one? Yeah. And I suspect it's probably not nailed down on the calendar as these things go, but just maybe talk a little bit more about what people get out of these conferences. And again, just a reminder, we'll have the information on how to access the video recordings and the transcripts and everything else that we've collected from these events.
Exactly, and the SUSRIS is unparalleled in terms of its archives and its cataloging and preserving not only video and commentary from this event, from a variety of events that actually haven't been documented sufficiently, and thankfully are by SUSRIS. The agenda and those sorts of things are also available on the U.S. Saudi Forum website, which is still up and will remain up. This initiative was intended to be, excuse me, a sort of a recurring every 2 years regional outreach that involved a significant Saudi commitment in terms of senior leadership and also in terms of the private sector representation. And over the course of the events, the senior leadership, from the Minister of Finance, Minister of Commerce, Minister of Economy and Planning, just a really high-level approach. Now, apropos to what you were talking about, which we think is the meat and potatoes of it, and that is the meet and greet, the opportunities to do business. The nature of these events has been sort of two-part. We have high-level speakers, both U.S. and Saudi, and the Secretary of Commerce the sitting Secretary of Commerce has participated and spoken at every U.S. Secretary of Commerce has spoken at every one of these, as well as other high U.S. officials. We want to have a window into the policy at the national level. It's important, and that's why these ministers and secretaries come and speak. It's important from our perspective to use these events as a platform to essentially project and explain what Saudi Arabia's national interests are. So, in other words, these aren't oil conferences, and they're certainly energy is an aspect, but they're education, technology, knowledge-based economy conferences. They're healthcare conferences. By that I mean these are things that these are priority sectors that Saudi Arabia wants to bring attention to, as well as many others. So you have.
I think that's a very good point, because the coverage is not just deep but widespread across, as you mentioned, healthcare, infrastructure, energy, renewable energy, education, it's water, power generation. It was unbelievable the amount of material that was covered, and at such a high level.
That's exactly right. So there in Los Angeles, as with Atlanta and Chicago, there are 14 breakout sessions. And these breakout sessions are all-star sort of platforms in and of themselves. You're going to have extraordinarily capable and experienced and key people in the sector on a breakout panel. So this is married with the high policy and the practical application in a specific sector. So a U.S. business person can go to these and do go to these and can understand the priorities and the direction of the country, but also get into detail and great depth in the sector they're interested in, while also having an opportunity to initiate contacts and relationships with people he might want to partner with, he or she might want to partner with. So, for example, I mean, even in Los Angeles, there was a B2B program that allowed people in advance to reach out to potential counterparts and strike relationships and set up meetings. So what you're talking about and what you are deeply immersed in was what we really want to get to, which is a very active foyer. You know, the ante rooms this was held at the JW Marriott in LA, this last one, which is a relatively new hotel right now in the Staples Center and the Nokia Theater. It's very hot and it's really, really nice. But the space is beautiful. But we were really delighted about the activity in all the ante rooms and the lobbies and that sort of thing. But to us, that's the litmus test of what we were trying to get at, which is serious and productive discussion about business. And we felt like we hit the mark pretty well in all three of the events in Los Angeles as well. But you go down. You talked about the sectors, excuse me, and I think you touched on a lot of them. It's a one-of-a-kind resource. You won't find anything like this in the U.S. Now, as to the next one, the main drivers out of Saudi Arabia are the Ministry of Commerce and CIT, Committee for International Trade. They're the ones who are, and CIT in particular, is the ones organizing the event. But the main driver in terms of time and place is the Ministry of Commerce. So it's a little bit out of our hands. We're optimistic and hopeful that they'll be continued because there's a terrific franchise. So I'm unfortunately I'm not able to make any kind of momentous announcement about it.
Well, we'll stay tuned on that. And past being prologue, I know that these things come together somewhat at the last minute.
Yes.
And it could drop out of the sky at any time. Before we shift gears, let me remind people that we are inaugurating a new service jointly between the Saudi-U.S. Trade Group, SUSTIG, and the Saudi-U.S. Relations Information Service, SUSRIS.com. And we're pleased to be talking with Richard Wilson, the president of the Saudi-U.S. Trade Group. I'm Patrick Ryan, the editor-in-chief of SUSRIS. And Richard, let's talk a little bit about business. We talked about the Business Opportunities Forum, but you are in a unique situation where you have your pulse on U.S.-Saudi trade, what the atmosphere is like, what's going on with what some people call the second boom, hundreds of billions of dollars of trade and investment opportunities over the next decade. That was talked about at the Business Opportunities Forum. But can you talk to us a little bit about what the current environment is and American business people who might be interested in discovering more about Saudi Arabia as a destination for their business relationships?
You know, it's extremely attractive, and I say that recognizing that there are a number of the majority of businesses in the U.S. are happy with the domestic market, and certainly in up until of late in a sort of a difficult global financial environment, there wasn't a lot of motivation to go abroad. However, in the midst of all that, Saudi Arabia has had particularly successful run, both because of oil prices in general, but also because of good fiscal management. But for some time now, going on 5 years, Saudi Arabia's been in an expansionary mode. Up until this last year, the last 3 or 4 budgets, national budgets, government budgets, have been, sort of one record after another. This year was not another record, but it was commensurate with the previous year. So they're in an expansionary mode, and typically what happens in Saudi Arabia, as every businessman will tell you, is the private sector is about 2 years behind the government in terms of growth. So we've had a long run here of really aggressive government spending. Private sector is expanding in a commensurate patterns. But Saudi Arabia, and it's interesting you should say the second boom, because a lot of people would say the first boom, and that was when there was a great deal of income and growth, didn't stick much. Domestic markets weren't mature enough. A lot of that investment went abroad. That's not the case here. You've got tremendous investment in infrastructure, tremendous growth across the board in terms of retail, in terms of construction, in terms of technology, and these are opportunities for U.S. firms that hadn't existed in the past. The ease of access is greater. There's the ease of doing business survey by the IMF World Bank that's done every year. Saudi Arabia has moved over the last 5-6 years from actually 6 years ago there, I think they were in the hundreds. They're now in the teens. There's plenty of markers that say it's easier to get into Saudi Arabia and do business. More importantly, there's plenty of economic incentive. Saudi Arabia is what I say is, and if you look at the Gulf, which is the economic driver of the region outside of Turkey and looking at Israel, but Turkey, Arab world, in the Gulf, and in particular Saudi Arabia, is driving growth. The issues that they have are very consistent with, say, what we saw in California in September. You know, this is tremendous issues and complex challenges having to do with utilities and waste and healthcare, roads, infrastructure, housing, this sort of thing, as well as technology. It was fascinating in San Francisco. I mean, in California, they sort of have 3 countries in California: technology in the north, agriculture in the center, and sort of smart tech in the south. Obviously, that's simplistic, but the point is where they are on their growth curve, Saudi Arabia is coming in right behind. There's tremendous numbers of technologies and processes and applications that exist in the U.S., are cutting edge, that have immediate application in Saudi Arabia. And so I think it's an attractive market for those reasons. And that's not, I'm not talking about a specific sector, I'm talking about growth across the board. But of course there are some, healthcare, anything healthcare, manufacturing, ports, these sorts of things are leaders. But you're going to see growth in almost every sector in Saudi Arabia. You're going to see opportunities to position a lot of what comes out of the U.S., which is proprietary technology and cutting-edge processes, best practices. All these things are of great interest to Saudis and Saudi companies. So, in brief, I think there's a real environment for success if you're looking abroad for your particular product or process.
Well, I know many of our readers this week have been following the trade mission visit of Secretary of Commerce Penny Pritzker in the Gulf, and she was in Saudi Arabia. It was hosted at a luncheon, and reading through her message to the business community in Riyadh, she mentioned that when they announced the trade mission, there were 80 companies that applied, and they could only take 21, and this was specifically the infrastructure sector that they were working with. So there is tremendous interest, but apparently the number of opportunities are incredible, and there's no exhausting the market there. She did mention that trade was on the upswing, that the export initiatives of the Commerce Department have been successful in increasing the trade balance, and it looks like the prospects for the future are promising.
Yeah, exactly. this is Saudi Arabia was the second largest market for exports in the U.S. The U.S. exports, second to the UAE. That's a little deceptive only because Saudi Arabia is such a massively larger market. But those two things combined suggest that A, there's room for growth, and B, there's tremendous opportunity for growth. So as you say, there's just really extensive opportunity here for the right company that comes in, in an intelligent manner. I mean, there's a lot of people sort of tout trade in the country as if you just take a number and go get it. We all know it takes some application, and you want to be diligent in your approach. But the fundamentals are there. Fundamentals are there for numerous U.S. companies.
Right.
And I should add, and you know this, Pat, there's a particular affinity for U.S. partners. Now, that's people toss that off, but I know, you've been in the region. I've been in the region almost 30 years. It's true. Saudis like doing business with America. A lot of what's been done over the last 7 years with regard to King Abdullah has been to strengthen the relationship with Saudi Arabia. And some of that, the subplot of that is to ensure continued strong commercial participation by the U.S.
Right.
But I don't want to derail you again.
Well, no. I was just going to reflect on the visit that you and I had to Riyadh in December, and every time I go, there's something new and different, not just in terms of the economy, but in terms of social reforms and the changing, evolving society there. Things are changing very fast. But the thing that struck me in Riyadh was the development downtown, specifically the King Abdullah Financial District. What an incredible project, and we featured that in SUSRIS, and there's a website for the King Abdullah Financial District. It's still being built, and in fact, I've seen on American television commercials for it. So they're reaching out to people to get involved, and I encourage our viewers to take a look at that. Let's as we get close to wrapping up here, let's turn to the relationship in general. But before we do that, I'd just like to remind everyone that this is a webinar series called Conversations, jointly sponsored by the Saudi-U.S. Relations Information Service, SUSRIS, and I'm the Editor-in-Chief of SUSRIS, Patrick Ryan, and we're joined today by Richard Wilson, the President of the Saudi-U.S. Trade Group. Richard, President Obama is going to Riyadh to meet King Abdullah, and it had originally been touted in the news as a fence-mending mission, but apparently some of the high-level meetings that have taken place have addressed some of the issues that have cropped up in the relationship in the last 6-12 months. But can you give us a sense from your perspective of the health of the Saudi-U.S. relationship? We occasionally cover some of the history of the relationship, stretching back decades, that people may not be familiar with, but maybe just a short story of what the relationship means at its many layers, not just business to business, but the government relationship. We also see a social relationship. There's tens of thousands of Saudi students, many of whom SUSTIG has worked with through an ambassador program. But can you give us your impression of the overall relationship?
It's an interesting time, and I was talking with Saudi ambassador to the U.S. Adel Al-Zubair not long ago, and he was talking about the difference between post 9/11 period and today. And the reason he brought this up was because there's been a great deal of discussion and commentary about the state of the U.S.-Saudi relationship in following the Saudi decision to decline a seat on the UN Security Council board, the UN Security Council, and also a lot of the sniping that's gone on vis-a-vis, well, you can head on back, from Bahrain to Egypt, obviously the great disappointment in the U.S. choice of Syria, and also the Iranian dialogue with regard to nuclear capability. His point was, okay, we hear this, we understand this. He thought it was a little overblown because he felt like the relationship now was so much more institutionally and much more institutional and much more grounded in terms of collaborative and cooperative platforms for the U.S. and Saudi Arabia to work together, and across the board, counterterrorism, intelligence, defense. He pointed out, if we wouldn't be spending $60+ billion on military equipment with a partner we didn't think was going to stay the course. Now, understandably, the Saudi ambassador to the U.S. is taking care of this relationship and managing the relationship. I would say it's somewhere in between. And I would say the Obama visit is a marker of a nice bit of recovery. And it's the end result of, I'd say, about 3 months of very concerted and directed effort on the part of the U.S. and Saudi Arabia to get things aligned a little better. Clearly, there's been friction with regard to Syria. Saudi Arabia felt like this tide could have been turned in late 2012 with help to the right resistance group in Syria. U.S. obviously, at that point, chose not to take any kind of measures, either in support of these resistance groups or subsequent to that in response to Assad's use of chemical weapons. By that I mean military. Saudi Arabia is concerned with our approach with Iran. Mostly not that they don't want a resolution of the Iranian nuclear issue, it's that they want to make sure that we understand that the Iranians' capabilities extend much beyond the Iranian and any nuclear threat, and that their ability to disrupt and disturb across the region comes in many guises and many forms. So they don't want us to be naive about that. But the larger thing is that we've gotten out of line, I think, in terms of our security and intelligence cooperation. Not that it wasn't there, but that we got too far apart. Saudi Arabia, I think, said, look, you need to pay a little closer attention. We need to sit down closer and coordinate more closely on these things. This is our backyard. What you're doing is too often does not take into account what we think is priority, and we just need to do a better job of this. So there's actually, the result has been, I think, fairly mature. What's happened is that there's been a reshuffle in terms of who has the portfolio with Syria and intelligence and other things. Mohammed bin Naif, who's well known in Washington, respected in Washington, interacts with American counterparts on a regular basis, is now in charge of that portfolio. Mitab bin Abdullah is also called in. Saudi Arabia has been asked, I think, probably on its own volition, but also I'm certainly encouraged by the U.S. to sort of formalize and de-conflict who's involved in the Syria conflict from the Gulf. By that I mean some of the brouhaha with Qatar has to do with, I think, Saudi Arabia trying to align the deck chairs properly so that everyone can come in and work to the same end on the same team and in coordination. So the Obama visit seems to me to be affirmation of this work that's gone on. As you know, last month, senior intelligence folks from Turkey, Jordan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and elsewhere were in town in Washington, D.C., probably setting out the framework for all this. So I think Ambassador Al-Jubeir was right in that there's significant institutional apparatuses in place to help us correct when we get off. And I think a lot of the commentators are right, is that we got off. I think Saudis have been not pleased with U.S. choices of late, and particularly not very pleased with their the pace and the timing and the tone of their coordination efforts with Saudi Arabia. So this Obama visit is very timely to get everyone back on the same page.
Can you comment in the remaining few minutes we have about some of the other aspects, in particular the Saudi Students Program, the King Abdullah Scholarship Program, and the role that SUSRIS plays in promoting the ambassadors at the business forums and the connections that you and your staff have?
Certainly. The King Abdullah Scholarship Program was instituted after King Abdullah met with George Bush in 2005. It's brilliant. I mean, it's flat out brilliant, if you ask me. I think it's an initiative that has really sort of unparalleled potential for impact across the board: education, commerce, society. So you have now, under the auspices of the King Abdullah Scholarship Program, now close to 100,000 Saudi students. Maybe better than a quarter of those are women. They're studying at American institutions, colleges, universities, across the board, with this particular emphasis on STEM programs, so science, technology, math, economics. So it's not soft. They're not soft disciplines. It's not intended to be that. But the ramification, and there's plenty of reasons to do this. Saudi Arabia has a booming economy. It doesn't have a lot. It doesn't have sufficient numbers of employable graduates. So, Saudi Arabia needs to address its K-12 system at home, as well as some other things. But this is a very aggressive effort to educate students abroad, particularly in the U.S. Will have very positive impacts for employable Saudis as they come back home. More important, and from our perspective, Saudi-U.S. Trade Group and SUSRIS as well, we think this defines the future generations of the relationship. We've had after 9/11, the number of students Saudi students studying in the U.S. dropped close to 3,000. I think it was under 3,000. So we probably have a 10 to 15 year gap where the affinities and the relationships and the partnerships that are established when people are at school, there's a little gap there. But after that period, you're going to have just a deluge of Saudis whose formative periods, both business-wise and socially and even politically, will have occurred in the U.S. And this is invaluable in terms of a relationship. And we think it will drive the commercial relationship in terms of making it much stronger going forward. Because a lot of these Saudis are going to get going to be exposed to business opportunities, ideas, technologies here in the U.S. and we'll want to take them back to Saudi Arabia or partner with these folks in Saudi Arabia. Likewise, socially, I think King Abdullah is perfectly aware of what's going on. Saudis are uniquely, I find fascinating because they could be in the most progressive country in the world. When they return home, they're fundamentally conservative and they're very attuned to their society. Yet, there's tremendous change going on in Saudi Arabia. And part of it is the demographics, because it's needed. You can't really fully develop your economy if 50% of the population is minimally employed, or there are significant obstacles such as driving and that sort of thing to be employed. But the students coming back from the U.S. will still be fully and wholly Saudi, but they'll have different perspectives and different expectations, as well as different skill sets. It's a gift, really, to the U.S. in terms of strengthening our relationships in that region, because they're now going to be underpinned by tremendous and longstanding personal associations that are as valuable as anything. So I think it's a great program, and I know you agree. SUSRIS supports this program as much as we can. We work closely with the Saudi Arabian Cultural Mission, which oversees all these students. Work closely with the Saudi Embassy here, and are supportive in every way of this, and are eager to implement and help out and further any program that is going to be aimed at helping this scholarship program succeed, because it's really something special.
And for those who are not familiar with the King Abdullah Scholarship Program, if they visit our website, SUSRIS.com, and just search for scholarship program, they'll find dozens and dozens of articles and interviews with Saudis and Americans involved at all levels. We've had articles written by English as second language instructors who had developed very close relations with Saudi students and high-level officials. And you're right, it is quite a tremendous program and cannot be highlighted enough. Well, Richard, we're pretty much through time. I'll remind everyone that I'm Patrick Ryan, Editor-in-Chief of SUSRIS.com, and we're speaking today with Richard Wilson, President of the Saudi-U.S. Trade Group, SUSTIG. Richard, any last thoughts on your organization, the Saudi-U.S. Trade Group, the program, the webinar program that we're launching today, or any other thoughts you'd like to share?
No, we're excited about 2014. We're working through revision of the website, as well as a number of upcoming programs involving some CIT senior officials, Committee for International Trade officials coming here, and as well as reprising, as you may recall, we did a very interesting U.S. Saudi Policy Forum in Washington that included the Minister of Finance, as well as senior Washington administrative
right.
officials. And we're working to reprise that hopefully towards the end of the year. It's a little bit of a moving target, but we think it's timely and we'll get a good hearing. Great.
Well, thanks so much, and thank you to our viewers for joining us. My name is Patrick Ryan. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of SUSRIS. SUSRIS.com is a place you can go to find some information about what's going on in the relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia. And we've been joined today by Richard Wilson, President of the Saudi-U.S. Trade Group. Thanks very much, Richard, and we'll look forward to doing some more of these with you and bringing in some other guests.
Pat,
and that's it. That's it from here, and thank everyone for joining us.